Welcome to the Daily Objective. It is a Saturday, as I've mentioned, as we've done last week. We will be running the Daily Objective on weekends as well for the time being during the war in the Middle East, which I expect will to be going on for some time, although I don't think it should. As always, we've said in the past, I've seen a little bit of Western media coverage over the past few days, and I think it's even more important that we give some updates for people who don't actually want to see that some of the despicable ways in which this is covered in Western media. So, but again, we're not a news channel. I am picking out some stuff, basically headlines out of what's going on in Israel. So if you do want to get into more details, you will have to find sources that you can stomach. We've been talking about the issues in the north between Israel and Hezbollah. There have been 30 rockets fired from the north over the past few hours or day or so. There have been a few other incidents, some terrorists trying to cross the border, some potentially some drones sent over. And as of now, it's just this war of attrition. But of course, Hezbollah is keeping the IDF busy up north, while near the Gaza Strip, the IDF is preparing, presumably, for a massive ground operation in Gaza, which might be the moment in which Hezbollah decides now we can strike from the north when the IDF is busy. And speaking of what the IDF says they'll do, so they're saying we are preparing for an assault on Gaza from the air, from the sea, and from the land. And I don't know. I mean, I don't particularly want to hear this kind of stuff in advance. I'd like to see it rather than hear it. We talked yesterday about about Israel telling the residents of the north of Gaza, about a third of the Gaza Strip, to evacuate. So they gave a 24-hour warning or 24-hour notice. Some have evacuated, some have not. A couple of hospitals have said that they are refusing to evacuate. The question is, I remember when Obama said to Syria, this is the line in the sand, or however he put it, with
chemical weapons,
with chemical weapons, and of course they used chemical weapons, and that line was crossed, and Obama did nothing. And the question of whether or not the U.S. should be involved in something like that is irrelevant here, because I think once you do say that and you don't follow through, you are making a statement to the world that you are not, you don't mean business when it comes to taking any military operation that you say you think is necessary. So I hope Israel isn't doing that. I hope there will be something that would make those people in the north of Gaza who evacuated glad that they evacuated, and those people who didn't, neither glad nor not glad, because they don't have the capacity to be either. But we will see what happens with that. The body count has not changed. Last I heard, it was, as I mentioned, they are counting it by the hundreds. It was 1,300 last I heard. And I will repeat, and I'll maybe repeat this every day for the foreseeable future. We're trying to help in whatever way we can. One way we can help is Israel needs to get out of Israel and needs a place to stay for a while. Get in touch with us, and if anybody has a place outside of Israel where they can host people who again have to leave the country, also get in touch with us. So far, we've had some of both. Luckily, we've had more people offering places to stay than people needing to leave. But we've had a few people come to London, and I know others who have left and are not coming to London. So and we've had offers from people in other countries. So please keep them coming. And if there's a need, we will let you know. All right. I'm here with James Valliant. We're going to talk about Israel's future, and I was I was kind of struggling with what title we might have, and people who watch this later might see a different title if I think of something better. But I am thinking kind of what is the day for the war look like? Um, I have some thoughts on that, but I've been talking long enough. James, I will go to you first with that.
A lot depends on how the war goes down. As you say, I'm already a bit distressed that the response already we should have had already some response. You and I would have had, I think, a much stronger response and a much quicker response. I understand that there are hostages involved, but you and I have also discussed, you in particular have discussed the morality of that particular moment and what the real needs of that moment are. Um, for years, Hamas has been lobbing missiles at Israel, and for all the adults, and you make a great distinction with children, and unfortunately, children are put at risk by their parents wherever they are. I mean, unfortunately, children are dependent on the poor judgment, including the poor safety judgments that their parents make. But they have been, for every adult who's been remaining in a country that has been lobbing missiles at Israel year after year after year, I find it hard to believe that there is anyone semi-conscious in Gaza right now who doesn't know the kind of, and hasn't been in effect tacitly supporting the kind of government they have there. I hesitate to even call Hamas a government, but they must be treated like the sovereign entities that they have been elected to be, which for the most part they are. Now, the future depends very much on the present. I think the future of Israel and the future, frankly, of Prime Minister Netanyahu depend upon how this goes down and how he deals with this matter. All the eyes of the world are on this right now. All the more important, you say, unfortunately, you think it's going to take a long time. I agree with you that that would be very, very unfortunate. The best way to end these things is overwhelmingly, powerfully, decisively, and quickly. And when you are facing threats like that from Hezbollah in the north, such a significant threat, I just want to remind our international viewers that Hezbollah has many more and many more powerful rockets than Hamas did. They've both been funded for years, millions and millions and millions of dollars worth from the government of Tehran. But again, when you talk about the long-term prospects for the entire region, that's, of course, we always keep coming back to Iran. And I do not think, I mean, Hamas must be eliminated. But even were we to eliminate Hamas, there will be another head come out of this hydra. And frankly, we must, my own government is culpable to a large extent because it's sanctioning of Iran for so long. And the very idea that, I mean, here we have Biden not wanting to admit that he's told Qataris to suspend the latest 8 billion, mind you. They haven't worried about the billions in oil revenue they've let Iran have year after year after year, which has gone directly to support Hezbollah and Hamas and supply these very weapons that involve this. So if I were president, of course, I wouldn't have diplomatic relationship with either Saudi Arabia or Iran. Saudi Arabia must eliminate these, because it's all government sponsored, these hate-preaching madrasas in Saudi Arabia, until they stop preaching the destruction of Israel and the West as a matter of government policy. I think it's utterly insane to have any discussions with Saudi Arabia. Iran, I would be aggressive against. They have committed act of war after act of war against both Israel and the United States now, decade after decade after decade. We must eliminate the government. We must take active steps to eliminate the government in Tehran. That is the only long-term solution for the region, in my opinion. But you're absolutely right. I think a lot will depend. If there is an inadequate response, if there is an inadequate response, though, to this, how many times do we have to be Cassandra, as I say? How many times do we have to make the prediction? More babies will die. I wish someone would give a thought to the future babies that will die here if effective and complete action is not taken, decisive action that has psychologically overwhelming impact on the people involved here. That's my opinion.
So something I forgot to mention in my update at the beginning is Israel did send some soldiers to some part of the north of Gaza just because they thought that there were some bodies of the hostages there, and that turned out to be true. So they did go in and get some bodies of hostages who were killed, and came out after that. Yeah, so when we look, and actually the hostages is one of those issues, or when we look at, or when we think about the future, it's good to look at the past and look at the lessons of history. Now, if we look at the lessons of recent history, the hostages being a good example, why Hamas wants to kill as many Jews as possible, and they killed many Jews in this operation. Yet they went out of their way in some cases to take additional risk to bring back hostages rather than just kill them. Why is that? The reason that is because Israel has told them that they will release murderers in exchange for for hostages. In the case that we've mentioned a few times this past week, Gilad Shalit, one soldier, Israel released over 1,000 prisoners, over 400 murderers. Israel has released in the past living terrorists in exchange for bodies of soldiers, and this is a statement to the enemy that if you take hostages, we will pay a
I have to say that my own president has been no help in this regard. He's willing to pay billions to get people back from Iran. And I guess it behooves Islamic fanatics to take hostages. And what has America and Israel done but to send a message to every Islamic fanatic in the world that taking hostages pays? What have we done? What have the leaders in both of our countries done but encouraged just that, Razi?
Yeah. And so when we talk about Israel's future, the question, as you mentioned right at the start, is how Israel deals with it now, and how they deal with freeing the hostages. And the question there is, we've said this as horrible as it sounds, like to fight this war properly, you have to assume the hostages are dead, or fight it as if there are no hostages. And if you can release any of them, militarily, I highly doubt that that's possible, but that is the only way that you can do it.
That is the only way. If they have some brilliant plan and they have some opportunity and we know there's a chance of doing it, of course, if you know there, and I've heard Israel telling family members, I heard an interview from one mother whose children are hostages from the Israeli government told her today that her children are somehow still alive. She knows, can you imagine a mother in that kind of situation? She knows her children are still alive. At least the Israeli government has told her that. I am not, her emotional position, I cannot even imagine right now. And I'm aware of the human issue here, but I'm also aware of what these animals did on Saturday and how they treated people, and how warning, I have to have one of those caution warnings about some of the things I've heard about. When we hear about the mutilated bodies, when we hear about beheaded babies, children burnt alive, people raped, young people raped next to the bodies of their dead friends. When you hear about unspeakable evil that I cannot even wrap my head around, I cannot imagine what those hostages could be going through right now. And part of my concern is They're suffering right now. What's going on right now? What are the odds that we're really ever going to get them back? And besides, we can in no way, shape, or form reward these monsters for what they did in taking hostages. Killing the hostage takers has to be the greater priority for all hostages that might ever be taken again. And as I say, and I keep saying, we have to think about the dead babies in the future. It is because of our appeasement of the past that we have these dead babies. So let us think, ladies and gentlemen around the world, about these dead babies, these children burnt alive, and ask ourselves, what is it going to take to prevent that from ever happening again? That must be our overriding priority. And it does sound harsh to say that we basically have to treat them as casualties already, but they are. But they are.
Yeah, death might not be might be the second worst option in their case. If you are under such horrible conditions in Gaza, I don't want to imagine what they're going through. And but again, of course, if you're fighting a war, and this is another point about Israel's future, is if you're fighting this war, even if the worst case scenarios of Israel in a ground operation in Gaza and then an attack from the north with a full might of Hezbollah, which will cause damage that is far worse than what was done on Saturday, and then Iran themselves take part, which how that ends, I again would rather not try to imagine. But even if Israel fights this war as it fought wars before, trying to protect civilians on the other side, but going in a little bit more forceful, damaging Hamas to a great extent, and then everything kind of quiets down. It is a statement for the future. If Hezbollah is not involved now, they will, they will do their thing at a later date and will only get stronger between now and then. So I think Israel's future, I've been pessimistic about Israel's future for a long time. I think Israel is heading towards its own demise by not fighting back against its enemies. I think it's the beginning of the end, or further along towards the end, if Israel doesn't completely eliminate Hamas, Hezbollah, and remove the Iranian regime in this war.
I don't see why our president is hesitating, frankly, to call out. I mean, I do see why. He's been appeasing them and sanctioning this, and he is at least partially responsible because of his sanctioning of Iran, and because of it, he doesn't want to be perceived approaching an election. It should be clear to all Western leaders that this was an act of war by the nation of Iran. They have been funding Hamas and Hezbollah to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars for many, many years now. And until we recognize that, as I say, the Hydra will grow more heads, and stuff like this, terrorist acts like this will be happening. We got Western leaders can't use their fuzzy glasses on this one and say, oh, Shiite versus Sunni. Oh, no. Iran is funding terrorist groups of both categories. And the terrorist acts will continue to happen until we call Iran what they are: the enemy here, one of the enemies here, the source of the enemies here. And I see unity, at least in Israel, to a certain degree. You guys were facing some of the greatest political and constitutional issues in your nation's history, and yet they seem to have been, at least for the moment, largely put aside so that there can be unity to fight a war that needs to happen. At least that's the perception. Compared to any other perception that we have, that's at least what we're getting. In the United States, unfortunately, we can't pick a Speaker of the House. Even under these circumstances, the Republicans, who are supposed to be the friends of Israel, mind you, are still all caught up in their problems, rather than be able to pick a Speaker of the House when an international crisis of this dimension is going on. The world's leading military power can't get its act together in its main legislative body. So, but I've been critical of you and I have both been critical of Netanyahu, and I will be even more critical of Netanyahu if he doesn't do half of what's effective in eliminating Hamas here. I have to say I am not terribly hopeful that we will get the kind of response that we will get. But this is not the week, Mr. Donald Trump, to be criticizing the Prime Minister of Israel, about whom you and I have both been critical in the past and are probably not very terribly hopeful about the future with. But this, frankly, as an international matter, Razi, an international leader should not be calling Hezbollah smart. They should not be, because Mr. Netanyahu recognized Biden as president, have a personal vendetta. And Mr. Trump's own little fragile little ego tells him he's the only one in America who could handle this properly from our perspective. I'm disgusted with some of the response here with Mr. Trump, with our inability to get our speaker even in our most important legislative body at a moment like this. At a moment like this, ladies and gentlemen,
it is important to remember that is actually Trump's issue with Netanyahu. As far as we know, Trump lost the election. Netanyahu did what leaders do when there are elections in other countries. You call the person who was voted in, whether you like them or not, and congratulate them on their victory. And Netanyahu did that. And Trump, of course, was saying the election was stolen. He didn't appreciate that, and we hear that now. But in terms of the political turmoil in Israel, yeah, it was the most split politically. The country has been most split in its history. It was really unprecedented, and then of course the terrorist attack was the biggest, the deadliest day in Israel's history. The issues there have not gone away, and we're going to talk about some of the issues in Israeli politics, I think, later this week. They haven't gone away, but the thing that both sides seem to agree on is that this should never happen again, and they should take whatever action necessary. By their standards, I think the action they're likely to take is not enough. And I wanted to make another point about, when you think about the future, you look at the past, and one other thing we can look at is we call this Israel's 9/11. Let's look at America's response to 9/11 and the results of that. So America, had a list of potential targets. I think, going through the list would have been not a bad idea, but America went first after the kind of easiest target on that list in terms of building an international coalition, as Harry Binswanger mentioned on HBTV. They started by dropping food and medicine, and so. The way that war is fought, I think we saw when 20 years later, the Taliban got back in power in Afghanistan. They went after Iraq because that was also, we remember the protests and the fact that France was going around trying to prevent it from happening. But there was a much wider coalition that America would have built if they wanted to go after Iran. So Iraq was target number 2. I think that kind of basically that kind of approach of you need a consensus of other countries that were not attacked and don't necessarily have our best interest in mind, and you need to watch out for civilian casualties. That is the way you lose a war. That is the way you indicate to future aggressors that you will not fight back fully. And I think this is what it is.
I would never be elected president of the United States, but if I were ever elected president of the United States, if it were just me and Israel, if the entire world were screaming that we were warmongers, war criminals, worse than any dictators that had ever existed in history, and if it was just Israel and the United States alone going after to take down the Iranian government, it would be one of the most important and noble causes that we could do right now. Objectivists have been predicting for decades that our appeasement of Iran would cause continued nightmares. Our inadequate response at 9/11 obviously didn't stop the issues. We are just as much at risk today as we were then. These people have all the patience in the world. They are culturally, religiously committed to their hatred of Jews, hatred of Western civilization. We have to take them at their word. We have to take Iran at their word. We have to take Hamas's charter at its word. They want the Jews to be killed, destroyed, Israel destroyed, and they want to fight Western civilization in every way they can. And when you see something like what happened last week, it is quite obvious that they very much mean it. And unless we take clear military decisive action against the right enemies, this will go on, and this will continue to go on. And I do fear for the future of Israel absent that.
Yeah, so we've mentioned that all shows on ARCUK's YouTube channel, other than the Daily Objective and the reality show, are on pause at the moment, and we are basically talking about nothing but this war on all these shows, and we are doing weekend shows. By the way, our members only activities are going on, so we need to wrap up, because in 3 minutes for platinum members and above, there is the ARCUK Philosophy Forum. But I will say that James, you will be joining me again tomorrow, and you mentioned objectivists have been saying this for decades. Tomorrow is Leonard Peikoff's 90th birthday. It would have been nice to celebrate it in a different way, but we will be covering this topic and covering particularly Peikoff's warnings and advice and statements over the years about confronting the threat of Islamic terrorism. So that is tomorrow's show. We do have many super chats. I want to thank everybody for your super chats. Jonathan Honig sends $10, then another $5. Jeff Bannister with $1 Canadian. Luca with 10 Swiss francs says, thanks Razi and the whole ARCUK team for the continuous coverage on the new terrorist atrocities and Israel response. People of Israel, be strong as you are on the right side of history. Thank you, Mark, for a $10 super chat. Jonathan, again with $5, says, resaving the hostages, what about the famous raid on Entebbe? That is a good point, but that's a very, very different situation. I think it was, they were all held in one place. Israel knew how to get there. I still think it was risky, and of course the person, Netanyahu's brother, was killed in that raid. But yeah, trying to rescue hostages from Gaza, where they're possibly in tunnels, they're scattered across the city, they can be moved quickly. They have essentially the entire Gaza population taking part in this operation in one way or another, or at least they can recruit the local people, the citizens there to help them out. I think it would be a mission that has zero chance of success. I think maybe in particular cases where the terrorists screw up, you have very good intelligence, maybe that would be possible. But again, in the wider scope of this war, that's how you need to consider it. And are you going to stop efforts to destroy Hamas in order to save a hostage, which is, again, a horrible thing to say because it's a life of an innocent human being. But I think, no, in that case, you overall have to fight the war first and foremost. Wes sends a $10 super chat, says, thanks for constant analysis of this issue. Much appreciated. Thank you, Wes. And we have another $5 Canadian super chat from Jeff Bannister. Thank you everybody for your super chats and for watching. I know people, more people than usual have been watching our shows, and I think people have been sharing as well. So please do share if you think this content is valuable and perhaps a good contrast to the content you see in news channels, and of course and that helps with the algorithm. All right, James, we will be back here tomorrow. I believe it's 6 p.m. UK time, so not 5:30 at the usual time of the reality show and not of the Daily Objective. But it will be the Daily Objective. It will be you and me. So I will see you here. And thanks again, James. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Take care.